All right, looks like we are now streaming live.
Great. We are back into public session of the special meeting of the Park Board. I will just start, I was remiss at the beginning of the meeting to indicate we had received a couple letters of public input regarding our agenda topics today that have been distributed to all of the park commissioners. The next agenda item that we have is item number 4, interim director. We are at a point with the park board. We have been fortunate to have John Nyer serve as our interim director, and we appreciate very much his ongoing support. At the beginning of this process, John had committed to us for a 6-month period, and we are getting every penny of our salary for an interim director out of John, and we appreciate that. We also know that it's John's intent that he does have another company, and he had given us 6 months. So we are about at the end of that 6 months. So depending on our discussions here today, we will need to be pursuing another interim director to fill this role at the point in time where John's tenure is up with us, is his agreed upon time with the park board. So at this point in time, all the commissioners will be involved in looking and finding or helping to look for a new interim director for us. And that will be brought up in a public meeting going forward. So we don't have any action today to take on this unless there's any input from any commissioners.
Jim, I would just like to clarify that our agreement with John did not have a time frame placed on it, but that we did have a psychological commitment that we generally socialized. So just to be clear, there's no contract we can point to that indicates any sort of 6-month period.
Right. And I think it's also important to note that the park commissioners are very intent on doing the absolute best job we can, working with our search committee to ensure we get a candidate that is the perfect person or as close to as possible for the director's role. And want to make sure that we have someone in place as an interim director. We had hoped to have somebody in place in this period of time psychologically for John as well, but we continue to work towards that end. So any other comments on interim director? If not, we'll move to the director search. And Molly, you are the chair of our search committee. So if you would take over this item, please.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. I want to tee up a couple of things. And just to recap where we left this, the last time the selection committee met, it had determined that the candidate pool that we had received through March the 1st was insufficient to proceed to the interview stage. And I was going to follow that meeting with looking at our possibility to get a recruiter involved or potentially to reopen the application period. Since that point in time, we found out that there were a handful of applications that had been received on the final day of the job opening period. And we wanted the opportunity to evaluate those, which we have done today. We did determine that based on those applications that, again, we did not believe they were sufficient to proceed with interviews at this time. So we are here then faced with some discussion to be had here in open session about how we would like to proceed. My suggestion is that we reopen the application period for a very short period of time. And my basis for that recommendation is that since the application period has closed, I personally have been contacted by several interested and I think very interesting potential applicants who have expressed interest in the role. I think that its opening and closing and the media associated with that created some visibility that this is a great opportunity. And I see that we may have some candidates that may intend to apply, and I'd like to make that available to them. That said, as Jim has indicated, the time clock is ticking here, and it's critically important that we get a permanent director in the seat as soon as possible. As such, we did talk in the last meeting about the potential for our friends at the Cincinnati Parks Foundation to work on their own to engage a recruiter that would work directly for the Cincinnati Parks Foundation. And that recruiter would look for candidates in this community and perhaps beyond, and direct them to the city's application process. I have spoken with the head of HR at the city, which is Ed Ramsey, who I believe has spoken with the head of procurement, Bobby Hageman, who has indicated to the extent they're working directly for Cincinnati Parks Foundation and not advising the commissioners, this is something that can be done. So again, my recommendation is that we proceed parallel path here. Open the application period for about 7 days, starting about a week from now. And also ask the Cincinnati Parks Foundation to consider engaging a recruiter that would direct candidates to the application process, assuming that it is open during the time that they direct those candidates to that process. So with that, I'll pause and open it up for dialogue or rebuttal.
Molly, a question for clarification. The parallel paths. So first of all, reopening the application period for 7 days, starting about a week from now, right?
No,
And
now.
the second piece of that is accepting the offer from the foundation to engage with a search firm to identify candidates that they then would direct to apply through the city's application process, correct?
That's right.
So is that to happen within that 7-day period that the application is open?
Well, it couldn't possibly work that way.
Right.
I think the reasoning for the parallel path would be as really an abundance of caution in the case that the candidate pool that we identify and potentially bring to a first round of interviews does not result in the hiring of a permanent director. So I guess the thinking behind parallel pathing this is that if we get to our round of interviews and we determine we may want to hire a recruiter after those round of interviews, then we are going to push ourselves another month or two behind. So I do feel, again, if Cincinnati Parks Foundation is willing to commit some time and resources to this and are willing, that they can help potentially accelerate a process that we really can't afford to get any farther behind on.
Yes, thank you. I understand that. But I'm just looking towards the end of that process and saying, if the foundation identifies candidates that they want to recommend apply through the city system, is that system going to be open and available to them if we're saying we're closing it after 7 days?
They may not even get to that point.
Okay.
What do you mean they may not get to that point?
Well, here's another idea. The other idea, which I would also propose, is that the Cincinnati Parks Foundation doesn't engage a recruiter at this time, and we open the application process here in about a week and potentially move to interviews beyond that. Again, the challenge that we have with that is that if we are in the interview process with candidates over the course of the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we do not have someone that we propose to hire for this role, that we won't have been cultivating new potential applicants during that period of time, and we will be starting on square one. So one route is to go parallel path in an abundance of caution and maybe do some work that doesn't need to be done. Or we put one foot in front of the other and work through the candidate pool we have right now. Best case scenario is we have a permanent director in that pool, or the pool that is identified in this opening of the applications, and we hire a new director. So we can take a safe route and go parallel path, and maybe the Perks Foundation is doing work and incurring expense that is unnecessary, or we have potential candidates on the other side of hiring a director or not hiring.
Let me, if I may, ask a hypothetical question, Molly. So let's say we engage a search firm, and after this time period of open enrollment or open application, we are presented with 3 candidates. And I think Linda's question is, if that application period window has closed, how do we handle those applications that might come in after that, that we've identified through the recruiter?
Well, there would have to be an application open for them
Okay.
to make an application for that to happen.
Right.
If the process is closed, can't they just reopen it again to
That's the question.
facilitate the 3 new or however many new applications that you guys might have surfaced?
If we're going to run parallel, why bother to close it?
Well, that's sort of where I was going to. What is the purpose of closing in a week if we're having a recruiter trying to point people to that portal to open up for application?
Again, it's for an abundance of caution. I do not recommend that we keep this application period open for as long as it takes a recruiter to identify candidates, because it will take a recruiter. If Cincinnati Parks Foundation signed the dotted line with a recruiter today, it would take 4 to 6 weeks for them to identify candidates that I think would be prepared to apply for this role. And I think that we have enough qualified and interested people in this role for us potentially to go to the interview stage with some of them now. And again, we very well may have our permanent director in that pool. I'm afraid that if we wait to close a new application period 6 weeks from now, we will have lost any interested candidates in the first pool that applied as of March 1st.
But are we precluded from doing these interviews of those that we've already identified while the application's still open? Can't we start interviewing already some of the people that we have?
While we have an open application period?
Yeah.
I mean, in the private sector, you sure can. I don't know about the city.
I can
It
check
seems
with Ed
like-
if you want. My understanding is you can interview whenever you want.
Yeah.
It's also my understanding you don't have to have an open application period. If you have an interested candidate, you can just interview them or review their application when you want to. You don't have to have an open applications period to do that. You can just talk to whoever you want. I can confirm with Ed today, but that's my understanding.
So let's follow that through, because that's an interesting point. If make sure that it's okay that if the recruiter comes up with 3 individuals that want to apply, can they just simply apply for the open position without it being open on the official city HR website? But I think, said differently, I'm encouraged to hear that we can start interviewing anybody at this point in time so that we don't even have to wait for another week to get potential new candidates in. We can start scheduling and getting those that we've identified here potentially to the interview stage.
Jim, I like the train of thought you're going down, because it sounds like if we can start interviewing, then the most we're doing from the Cincinnati Parks Foundation side is waiting about 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, we're going to know whether we should use our resources to engage a search firm.
Yeah, I think kind of a staggered parallel path might really be a good solution. So if we can get going on interviewing the candidates in hand, you guys negotiate or select a recruiter, we might be halfway through or further through the process before they even get started. And, if you guys negotiate, call it a quick exit fee, if we find somebody in the first round, they get, some finder's fee or service charge, what have you. But then, they're cut loose and they get what, they deserve, and we got a great candidate. If not, if we don't find anybody in the initial pool, then we just continue down the path with whoever you guys select and whoever they surface as potential candidates.
Well, Dan and Brian, certainly you don't have to make any decisions on how you plan to do this today. It is, fully your choice on how to proceed. I think it's clear on, where we may have a very certain need for identification of new candidates directed to this application process.
So do we have, without naming them right now, first the question, do we have candidates that we want to interview that have been identified today?
Yes, I believe we do.
So does that mean that you are proposing that we proceed with the start of interviews with candidates that applied as of March 1st? Because I think that where I am on it is that candidate pool is not sufficient to start interviewing.
I think what I heard is you can begin interviewing any that you have right now, but also open it back up for some others and then interview those as well.
That is my proposal. And the basis for that proposal is I do think that I would recommend 2 or 3 candidates out of the initial pool. And based on the response that I've heard from the community, I think there are others that do intend to apply in short term. And I would like to open the application period in hopes that those interested people do apply. And at that time, I would like to propose that we bring in 4 or 5 candidates in for interviews. I just don't think that the 2 or 3 candidates that I think have, in my opinion, rise to the top of the first candidate pool sufficiently represent a broad scope of candidates that I would like to see.
Well,
And I don't,
Linda, you're on mute.
So Molly, your recommendation is that we open the application window. After 7 days, close that. And from that pool of candidates, we decide who it is we want to bring in for interviews, that we don't start interviewing until the close of this reopened application period.
right. And I'm not asking for a lot of time here. I think that we will have those applications in hand about 2 weeks from now. I think we can revisit with this group to look at any applications we received in that 1 week window, the applications we received in the first round, and make a determination together who we would propose to elevate to interview.
So then is it I'm trying to make this calendar work in my head. Is it that we're opening the application period today for a 2-week period, or we're opening it in a week for a 1-week period? What are we doing?
I don't know that we can open it today. So that's why I said, let's give HR a week to get this thing open.
Okay,
I
but
can't go hit the button myself, so.
I heard Kevin say that we can hire or we can entertain or interview anybody regardless of what the whether the application is open or not. So I'm not sure why we're,
So
you know,
I do want to refute that a little bit, because what we found with the last application period is that most of the applications came in several days prior to the close of the application period. So I don't exactly know how this works, but the closing periods seem to have some significance to it. Linda, to get back to your question, I would just like to close the application period 2 weeks from today. It may open on Monday, it may open on Friday. I don't really know when the opening is going to happen.
That's
because I
fine.
can't push that button.
That's fine.
Yeah, but let's carry that forward. So if we close it 2 weeks from today,
Which is,
and then we regroup to say, out of those, who do we want to interview? So now we're out 3 more weeks. Then we have to schedule the interviews. So we're out a month from now before we would have the first interview phase through Zoom or however we're going to do it. So we're out a month from now. In my mind, I want to make sure that if our intent is to go parallel, that we truly are doing that, so that the foundation, if the foundation is going to do it, I would like to know that, because if the foundation isn't going to do that, then we need to consider ourselves how we do that. If we're indeed at least a month out from having the first interviews, if we don't start today recruiting, we are at that position where we said earlier that we just fall that much farther behind in getting somebody in the permanent role.
I guess I wonder why we can't start interviewing next week with the potential people that we have, keep the thing open, and when they come in, if they're, you know, if we feel like we should interview them, well, then we can interview them. And that way you can at least cut down on that lag time that you're referencing.
I agree with you, Brad.
Yeah, I guess I think we need to get clarity on how restrictive this application period is and what we can and cannot do if it's open or if it's closed, and what kind of, restrictions that puts on us.
That, and I'm struggling a little bit with if there are, what will change if there's 2 or 3 candidates that we already have applications from that we're interested in. What will change in 2 weeks from now if additional people have interviewed?
I'm trying to reach Ed Ramsey while we're on the meeting. I haven't been able to reach him yet.
And I just want to be clear, I've got about 6 more minutes and I have to go.
Okay.
I'm going to have to drop this call. So we're going to have to come to conclusion or reschedule.
In a similar position.
Yeah, I'm 19 minutes late, so.
So Molly, what's, this is your, what do you want to do?
Jim, I've made my recommendation. So if there's a different conclusion the committee wants to come to, then I would say go ahead and put it on the table. My recommendation is that the 2 or 3 candidates that have kind of elevated to the top are not sufficient to move to the interview process right now, and that we should reopen the application period to receive the handful of candidates that may have some interest, and evaluate our options to interview them then. I understand where we are from a timing perspective. And I just think this is the right way to go.
So Molly, what you're saying is we don't have anybody in our pool to interview at this point.
That's not what I said. I just don't think that the 2 or 3 that are in there are, I just don't think that it's not enough to take to the interview stage.
I think there's a dynamic between different interviewed candidates. And I think what Molly's saying is you want to have a fuller group of candidates interviewed, not just two, and hoping if you think you might end up with 5 or 6 or 7, whatever the number is eventually, you want to have that full set before you start the interviews, because there is some degree of dynamism in the process where the responses of one candidate inform the questions you ask with another kind of thing. So is that a fair summation, Molly?
I definitely like to interview candidates all together because I think you can start to see weave together what you like about certain leadership styles and what you don't. And when you put weeks and months sometimes in between these, it's very difficult to give everybody a fair shake at the opportunity. Again, I don't think that we're putting a whole lot of time here between some candidates that we like from the first round and candidates that we may see come in through this very short window that I propose we reopen the application period.
So Molly, you're not saying that none of the applications we have in hand right now warrant an interview, but rather that you don't want to interview them in isolation. You would like to interview them as a group. So what you're asking is that we open the application period for a maximum of 2 weeks from today, get additional candidates through that process, and from that pool, 2 weeks from today, identify those candidates we want to invite for an interview.
That's right.
Okay.
So when do you pull the trigger, or when do you ask the Park Foundation to engage a search firm?
Well, we have asked them to do that. And I think that Brian and Dan will take that back and come to their own conclusions as to when they're ready to commit those dollars. I agree. We need to be informed as to what they're doing. So we need to know so we can bridge what we're doing. Brian, if you're willing to make that dedication today, you can, but I also accept that you may have other things to consider here.
Can I just say that, can we then, all right, knowing that in 2 weeks' time, we are going to start interviewing, can we start to schedule some folks so that we don't just start to schedule 2 weeks from now, but.
So Susie, the issue with that is that we have to announce who our candidates are. Kevin has advised us that we have to announce an open meeting who our candidates are. And as I say, I just don't think that
I understand.
we're not in a position to do that.
I understand.
As to, I think we've all chimed in. I think as a matter of process here, I think Molly has made a proposal, and I'm gonna, with your concurrence, Molly, Molly has made a motion, if you are willing to go to that we open the application process for 2 weeks. After that point in time, this group will meet, review not only the applications that we have in hand, but also those that may come in over the next 2 weeks. And that at that point in time, we will select from that group any candidates that we want to bring in for interviews. It doesn't mean that we have them. It doesn't mean that we don't have them, but we will make a determination in 2 weeks if there are applicants in our total pool today and in a couple weeks that we will bring in or we will schedule interviews with. I think Molly's motion also says that we are encouraging the foundation to begin, and they've already done that, but that we do a parallel path where the foundation is assisting the city of Cincinnati, so to speak, in identifying candidates to apply to the park board for this position. Molly, is that indicative where you?
Thank you, Jim. I think, yes, that's right. What we really want to get out of here today is reopening, and I am going to here propose a close date of May the 15th, which is a Sunday, so that when we come back on Monday, I will be in receipt of any new applications, which then can be forwarded to the selection committee.
And I appreciate that modification with a close date instead of saying open for 2 weeks, because we don't know when it's going to open.
Yes.
So a close date of whatever the date you said, Molly.
Yes. And then I will be able to forward those along, and I believe we will be able to have another special meeting aligned with the park board meeting on the 19th. And then we will be in a position that day to determine if, and announce potentially the candidates that we will propose to invite to interview. That's our goal.
I have that as a motion on the floor to take that process.
Okay, second.
Second by Commissioner Castellini. I don't want to close off if there's strong desire to make further comments, but are there any other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor with a second. Tia, I don't know if you're there, but can you call the roll?
President Getz,
Yes.
Vice President Thomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Castellini,
Yes.
Commissioner Lindner,
Yes.
Commissioner North.
Yes.
Okay. Can we ask the foundation to keep us informed as to your progress, just so it impacts our decisions as a board on the actions that we will take?
Absolutely. You have my commitment on that, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any other items to bring forth? We can't bring forth new items. It's a special meeting. So with
Yeah.
that, our next.
Jim,
Yes,
let me just offer a suggestion that I'm not sure what the process is for opening this up, how broadly that's publicized, but I would like it to be included in our social media so that people know that we have opened this up and closing down.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. And John, if you will ensure with Rocky that we use our social media platforms to advertise that we have opened this back up again, and then as process, if Kevin, if you can inform us to ensure we are clear on the process that we have when we can, if there is the need to have it open for accepting and interviewing additional candidates after the official period has been closed through the HR department.
I will, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. With that, our next meeting is May the 19th at 9 a.m. And with that, hearing no other objections, we are